Hey, how's it going? I'm gonna guess this video might have a lot of new faces on it because this first reaction's coming in a little early, so maybe it's gonna get some new eyes onto this channel. If you're new here, hey, what's up? How's it going? Welcome to the channel. I'm a giant Godzilla fan, majorly obsessed with the MonsterVerse, and have dedicated the better portion of my life to the MonsterVerse. So this is right in my wheelhouse. For the rest of you guys, what's up everybody? D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're gonna be doing my first impressions for the first episode of Monarch Legacy of Monsters. I don't know if the episode list is public yet, but the first episode is called Aftermath. I want to give a big thank you to Apple TV Plus for making this video possible. It was able to give me pre-screening access for the series so that I can make this video for you guys. If you're watching this video, that means the embargo has lifted on Monarch Legacy of Monsters. I'm not sure how people are going to respond to that embargo being lifted. I think some people are going to take to spoiling the show. Others are going to take to doing what I'm doing, which is giving you guys a very minimal look at it. I'm only going to be using visuals from the trailer in this review, and I'm going to keep things spoiler free, and this won't even be a full episode review. This is just my first impressions of how the first episode kind of made me feel. I really hope people don't go to spoiling this show. All the fellow reviewers out there have some integrity, but I'm pretty sure that the embargo is only lifting because the episode has aired publicly at New York Comic Con. Spoilers will be afoot on the internet. I'm just not going to partake. If you want to hear my spoiler thoughts, tune back in a month when we get to cover the actual show's release. I'll be reviewing it episode to episode with you guys. Getting into my first impressions, this is Apple TV Plus's new science fiction series that builds upon the MonsterVerse. This show expands upon specifically Godzilla 2014 and Kong Skull Island, and seeks to be a sequel to the original installment of the MonsterVerse before things kind of pivoted with King of the Monsters to become a bit more sci-fi silly. This series consists of 10 nearly 1 hour long episodes, so it's like one big movie drawn out over a long time. This show is a very big budget project, and it's clear from the very first couple seconds of this show, Apple TV Plus and Legendary care a lot about it and have put a lot of money into making this thing feel big budget and grand and epic in scale and scope. Also, big shout out Toho for getting involved. Toho gets credit for the show as well because they helped produce it. There were some executive producers involved. This first episode played out pretty much exactly how I expected, which I think is going to scare off a lot of viewers as a result, and that's because I think people are going in with the wrong expectations. So let this early review help to manage your expectations of what this show is. Calling the series Godzilla and the Titans for nearly an entire year, I think did incredible amounts of damage to this show's reputation, because the show's name was never going to be Godzilla and the Titans. It was always going to be some iteration of what eventually became Monarch Legacy of Monsters, and those two titles promise two entirely different things. One of them sets up false expectations, and the other one is an honest portrayal of what the show will be. This show is not Godzilla's show, nor is it about Godzilla. It is, in fact, a show with Godzilla about Monarch. There is an incredibly large difference there. This show is probably going to go down in history, and I've only seen the first episode, so this could entirely change as the show progresses. Maybe Godzilla has larger and larger presence as the show goes on. I don't even think he needs to personally. It's not what I think needs to happen, but I think that this show could very well go down in history as having a reputation alongside movies like Invasion of Astro Monster, Ebra, Horror of the Deep, and Destroy All Monsters. These are Godzilla films that Godzilla is in that are not promising to be Godzilla's story. Neither is this show. This show is advertising an in-depth look at the Monarch organization, with the trailer being very light on Godzilla, which is pretty much exactly how the first episode plays. I want to get the negatives out of the way quickly because I don't want to end on a negative note. And also, scientifically speaking, for those of you guys who don't know, ending on a negative sets a negative impression in your mind and is the thing that sticks with you. So I don't want to do that to you guys. I don't want to leave you guys on a negative. So let's just get this stuff out of the way quickly. And also, if you've been watching my coverage for Monarch Legacy of Monsters, this stuff's going to be nothing new to you because I've been talking about it since the trailer. This first episode was not very economical in terms of its structure. The structure didn't really make too much sense to me. In fact, when I watched the trailers, I thought the way the show was going to kind of bounce between time was going to be our main characters, Cate, Kentaro, and May, go seek out Lee Shaw, played by Kurt Russell, who then tells them stories about the past and about Monarch, and that was going to be our gateway into the past. That's not how this show works at all. This show is told in a non-linear fashion, bouncing between seemingly two parallel timelines, although given the way this episode ends, I think that's not going to be the case moving forward. I think we're going to be bouncing all throughout history depending on what episode we're watching. The two timelines that play out in the first episode do not intermix thematically in any way possible. They're not really relevant to one another at all. In fact, it seems that they only chose to do it this this way because it sets two things up. Number one, it adds some action to an otherwise pretty personal and small-scaled story. And number two, it sets up for a reveal at the end of this episode that, to be honest, I didn't even know was supposed to be a reveal because I guess I've been just predicting it for so long that I forgot that maybe that's not going to be something that everybody picks up on. It sets this thing up as a reveal, and then it's kind of like, that's the purpose of telling it in two stories. I think the show could have been more economical if it told them linearly, and I would have started with actually the stuff in the present day, which is not set in 2014, which introduces a whole new series of potential continuity errors that we've got to be on guard for moving forward with this show. Although we do flash back to the events of 2014 and the direct aftermath of 2014 as well, again in a non-linear fashion. The continuity in this show is just not hitting as hard as I'd want personally, as a giant fan of the MonsterVerse and someone who has followed it since its inception. While I loved the way this episode builds upon the MonsterVerse films of the past, it doesn't follow the rules of the MonsterVerse overall. Bill Randa's vlog footage from the trailer for Monarch Legacy of Monsters is included in this first episode, and it feels strange and out of place because he shouldn't have had the time to film it in the first place, and it suggests that certain events from Kong Skull Island played differently than we actually saw them play out in that film. There is one incredibly deep cut reference within the first episode dealing with this Bill Randa stuff that I am truly amazed about, and just shows that the Legendary Mythology team knows their ecosystems very well. It was in fact such a deep cut reference that I didn't even consider it in my previous coverage for this show because I thought there's no way that's ever going to be touched upon in a live action MonsterVerse project, and yet there it was. We also revisit some moments from the Godzilla 2014 film, but they play out differently here than they did in that movie, and in fact they play out less cinematically and make things feel a lot slower than they really were. I wasn't a big fan of that. I thought that the story that was being told there was wonderful and fantastic. I just thought that there was a better way to tell it that flowed a little more seamlessly with the 2014 film. There are also smaller things in this show that annoy me, and I'm a guy who nitpicks, so let me nitpick for a second. The intro in this show does not go hard. We're so used to those intros edited by the same editor who's, I can't believe I forgot his name, but he's a wonderful editor. He's been around in the Godzilla franchise since Godzilla Final Wars. He did the intro sequence for that film. He has also done the title card sequence for every MonsterVerse installment so far, and is the reason why they are so wonderful and incredible. Also, the music goes really hard in those films. It doesn't here. The music just sounded kind of generic to me, and I don't know how else to describe this other than the intro sequence for this show was an intro for a streaming show. You see the intro sequence for this show and you would instantly know that is a streaming show. The intros for the MonsterVerse have been so incredibly cinematic and beautiful and epic, and this really deflates all of that. They should have just straight up used an intro like the 2014 intro, or the King of the Monsters intro, or the Kong Skull Island intro was far more relevant to this show than this show's intro is. It's just a shame. It just kind of was slow and missing the energy of the MonsterVerse. Very little nitpick things here, like the inclusion of the Salesforce Tower in the 2014 San Francisco skyline when that thing did not exist until 2018. Also, the destruction of the Bay Bridge, it just doesn't add up with what we've seen in the MonsterVerse so far, so little tiny continuity errors that are visual like that take me out of the experience and make me a little bummed that there wasn't a little bit more attention paid, because the things look visually well done. It's just somebody should have stepped in and said that's not how it should be. Kind of like how Bill Randa's video camera is not seen with him following the helicopter crash in Kong Skull Island, and yet all of a sudden in the show he's walking around hanging on to it, at least for a little while longer during the events of Kong Skull Island. Finally, and this is what I consider the most important thing because it takes me out of the experience and shows that on the grand scheme of things, a series bible for the MonsterVerse overall is genuinely lacking and needs to exist more than just a mythology department. There needs to be a series bible for all the filmmakers to follow because they misuse terms like Titan. Titan is used in 1959 when in fact that was not a part of the MonsterVerse vocabulary within Monarch or the public until sometime after the Battle of San Francisco, when the term Muto became synonymous with the creatures that fought Godzilla. Before that point, the term Muto was used to describe all of the Titans. Also, they use the term Muto in this episode, but they use it to describe something that isn't a Muto. They use it to describe a series of what I can only describe as eggs, but the M in Muto stands for massive, and these eggs are only like 3 feet tall, so they're not Mutos, even though they could be a Muto's eggs, but you don't know that yet. You don't know. You haven't investigated yet. These are super species eggs, although I'm not even sure that term existed in the MonsterVerse until 1973, so they're just monster eggs. Also, and this is a thing that is subject to change very easily, I'm not yet sold on all the performances in this show. Some of the characters and performances are stronger for me than others. There is a lot of time to change that. Some of the characters are just a little generic, while others kind of frustrate me in certain ways. There are a lot of positives to this show, show, however, and I want to give credit where credit is due because this show hits the ground running right away in a scene that just screams, this is the MonsterVerse, and is filled with a love and excitement for the material, and it really got me into the show. It made me happy, and we hit the ground running in a way that I felt very satisfied and excited about. While the appearances are limited, and I want to stress that, there are 2 Titans seen on screen, sort of, and you'll have to see what I mean by that. We also have some hints to some other Titans that will be appearing in this show as it goes on, and we also get a picture cameo from an unfriendly face that I was really excited to see pop up in the background of a shot. That being said, the way the Titans are used is very thematic and powerful and gives a lot of weight to the appearances we see, even if again one of those appearances is kind of cheating. But there is a lot of weight and presence to what we see in this episode, and I really appreciated that. So although it was a sparing use, I liked what there was. This show does exactly what I've always wanted in the MonsterVerse, and that is unpacking the trauma that the Mutos caused and showing the public's reaction to Godzilla. And in this case, I am using the term Muto to describe all of the Titans because that term doesn't exist yet in the MonsterVerse. As far as the things that I originally wanted out of a sequel to a post-2014 Godzilla film, let's run through some of the things on the 15 things lists that I had created over the years to see what this show does and what I've been so excited about in this show as a result of. This show keeps things realistic. It shows the public's reaction to the Mutos. It establishes Godzilla as not just a hero. It introduces things slowly. It builds up to the kaiju's appearances. It ties into the nuclear allegories of Godzilla's past and remembers that the Mutos need radiation to survive. It has Godzilla destroy some things, and it is exactly what you're expecting. It has Monarch play a huge role, even though they are kind of a background organization. Maybe that's another reason they do the 2 split timelines, so that we could have people on the outside of Monarch and people on the inside of Monarch to follow at once. They continue to call Godzilla Gojira in this show and establish that that is the name that the Japanese call him. This show has humor, although it doesn't become too comedic like something like Godzilla King of the Monsters. This show strengthens the human story as much as possible and really gets us to care about some or all of the characters. And finally, this show makes us fear the kaiju in a way that I think is very real and awesome. I mean, they have never been portrayed as such a natural disaster as they are in this show. Also, I just love visiting Japan in this series. I didn't think it was something that we needed to do in the MonsterVerse, but I'm so glad we do because it's just a nice, cozy place to go in a Godzilla property. Also, Tokyo apparently is the only city in the entire world that has taken proper countermeasures to protect themselves against the Godzilla attack. In fact, I'm convinced that Tokyo is on the cutting edge of Titan protection in a way that every country and big city should be. Maybe they've learned because they've watched a lot of Godzilla movies or something, because the city is seen preparing for a potential Godzilla attack in a way that they don't even do in Toho's Godzilla films. I thought it was wonderful. That was the kind of human reaction to the Titans that I've always wanted to see. It's also really nice because it's like, yeah, stuff should be happening in the MonsterVerse. Like, what is going on in Godzilla vs. Kong? How are they fighting in Hong Kong and it's not evacuated? How could this be? Well, this show shows that if that had gone down in Tokyo, things would have been very different for our Titans. The stakes are very personal and small in this episode, which set the stage for a proper and exciting escalation of stakes. That's something that I think is one of the most important things any good show or movie can do, and it's escalate the stakes in a way that makes sense and is satisfying. And this episode starts small enough to do that while still having some grand epic scale. Also, the characters are overall pretty decent, despite the fact that there's really 2 characters that I didn't care for. A few of the standouts here are Kentaro, who I really liked, Emiko, who's fantastic, Keiko, who I thought was great, and Lee Shaw. I really enjoyed what we saw of Lee Shaw. Some of the dialogue is a little clunky, but it's not too clunky. It's not Marvel levels of exposition, which the MonsterVerse has occasionally dived into, for instance, some of the scenes in Kong Skull Island's first act, but I really liked the characters we saw so far, and I can't wait to see more of them. Also, the series tone is grounded and heavy and awesome, and that's what I like to see. Finally, the visuals are pretty strong here. Some of the CGI is truly beautiful, not all of it, but some of it is truly beautiful. It's really fantastic stuff, and it should hopefully make a lot of people realize that if proper time is given to projects, the budget doesn't necessarily matter, because the time given can result in the final product looking just as good as a massive big budget Hollywood film, even if it had a fraction of the budget of that. Overall, I guess my first impressions of Monarch Legacy of Monsters Episode 1 is that it was pretty slow, but it was a good time. It delivered on a lot of the things that I've always wanted in a MonsterVerse follow-up, and I've always been robbed of, so I'm really glad we're getting it now. I am worried that the general public is going to be turned off by this first episode because it didn't necessarily have a grand premiere. It starts small, and hopefully will continue to build up from there, and that's the case with a lot of good shows. I guess not many people have seen Monarch Legacy of Monsters yet, so I can't really ask what you've thought of it. But when you do watch it, come back to this video and let me know what you've thought of it. Until then, let me know what you're most excited for and what you're most worried for out of this show. show. I'm very curious to hear what everybody's thoughts are down below. I will continue to cover Monarch Legacy of Monsters episode to episode as the show airs, so please stick around on the channel for us to do that. Alright, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. Big thank you to the support I get on the Patreon. If you want to check out the Patreon, you can use the link in the description below where you can get early access to content, access to the Discord community, and more. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you guys next time for the next one. D-Man out.